Hi everybody, welcome to another session. Today we're going to talk about essential AutoCAD tools you need for Revit. Now, why AutoCAD? AutoCAD is one of the most, I think it's Autodesk's most successful program, and it's been used by various industry. For the Revit users, you would see a lot of the time consultants using DWG and send you the file. So when you're dealing with people that's in the civil side or surveyor, they're gonna send you a 3D DWG files in Civil 3D format. So you kind of have to collaborate them using that format because they don't have the Revit version for civil or survey. And most often, when you're working with DWG, it is much faster to work with, to open up the files inside AutoCAD so that you can just delete the stuff you want and remove or edit stuff quickly without exploding that element inside Revit. AutoCAD plugins, it's backwards compatible. Okay, so I have used my plugin since AutoCAD release 14 from 1998, and some of those plugins still works today. That shows you the level of simplicity within the AutoCAD programming, which allows you to use the same plugins over and over again, and then it still works to this day. Now, one of the things that I always get from a lot of the users is that they hate anything that is AutoCAD. I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel your pain because AutoCAD is often misunderstood for bad things, but there's some significant good things about it, which is why I made this topic. It is still the industry standard for general design. My previous job I'm with, users still use AutoCAD, okay, to do their general design. Once that general design in 2D, and then they import those DWG into SketchUp, and this is where they do a lot of the 3D elements. So it's still widely used. You would probably hard pressed to see not one office don't have AutoCAD in their desktop because it's still widely used. So some of the agenda for today I'm going to be talking about are exploding text, create simple massing within AutoCAD, point manager, 3D face slice and merge, and finally hatchmaker. Now, what's text explode? Okay, let me open up the Revit side of things. Now, Revit has these tools. Okay, if you go to architecture, there is one called the model text. Okay, if I place it on there, first I'm just going to hide this. Now, the biggest issue isn't so much of the text. It looks fine right now, but once that text hit a 1/4 inch, this is where things will just break apart. Okay, when you look at this, I mean, this is not very useful. So how do you remedy this? Now, inside AutoCAD, okay, I'm just going to open this up. You can type in a text, mtext. And what this do is that you can just create any text you want. You can use dtext as well. Mtext is just, for those who don't know, it's multi-text. Hopefully this AutoCAD will function. So what you could do with this text, I'm just going to draw in a box. I'm just going to call it model text. You can set it the size the way you want it. Let's say 0.25, okay, 1/4 inch. Now, the one thing you could do with this is that when you go to the Express tools, there's a symbol right here called modify text. When you scroll down, you see that there is an explode. If you're used to the pull down menu, it's under text, explode text. So when you click on this, what happened is that it's going to take those texts and then explode them as it is. So if you want to do signage, I mean, in my previous job, what I have to do is that we have to create some sort of like elevator, kind of like a mosaic, kind of like an elevator, kind of push pull button kind of a thing. And what tends to happen is that when you start doing smaller model text size for those, it will lose those information. So what I have to do is that I have to physically create a text inside AutoCAD and do this explode so that I get that proper text. So here I'm just going to scale. I'm just going to make it 0.25 so that this total height is 0.25. Now the benefit of this is that whenever you can, let's say I'm going to put in another text. Let's say this is the Time New Roman. Okay, you can actually choose any text you want. This is time, Time New Roman. Okay, apply, close, and then what you do is that you change those texts into that. Oh, I forgot to change. Oops. And then 0.25. Now if I want to explode that, all I have to do is just click on that and it will just explode and make it into that. So it has a pretty usefulness, because what happened is that if you want to size it according to that height, this will do it. For CNC guys, this will help them tremendously, because sometimes what happens is that if you give them a piece of text and when you translate that from PDF or other format, what tends to happen is that it can lose translation. So for CNC machine, they have to make sure that all of this has to be perfect. So what I typically do is that I explode those texts, make them a three-dimensional model, so that when I give it to the CNC guys, they will actually cut it based on what I'm giving them. So it's much more streamlined process, so they don't have to go in there and make sure all the texts are the same, because not every user is going to have the same font setup. So they may use Mac, I might use PC, so there's variations of stuff. So if you want to do it precisely, I would explode the text and give it to them in a DWG format. Now if you want to model it inside Revit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm just going to put into my content list routine. Let's say I'm going to go model text. Yes. So what you're going to do inside your CAD or Revit, sorry, I'm just going to go into the family. You can pick generic model. And what I like to do here is that I like to insert Import Cad. And I'm just going to go to my list routine and say this is going to be model text. I'm going to go visible. Okay, I'm going to go zoom all. Let's see, where's my text? Okay, it's right there. Sometimes you can't see it. Just going to push it right there. There we go. So what you're going to do here, oh yeah, this is one thing I don't like about Revit, is that it has this really tiny, you see that screen is too small. I mean, why do you care if that screen is too small? Sometimes I just don't get that. I wish they could just fix that, because you know, when you move certain things, you don't care how big or how small they're supposed to be. But it's one of those limitations. So next thing you want to do is that you want to do extrusion, and you can just say, okay, pick a line. Okay, can't create line. Okay, why? Okay, let's double check this, how big this is. You notice that sometimes it could get super small. Oh, I see. Okay, so this unit is not correct. Let's assume that this is inches. And then let me double check and see if it's the correct. No, it's not. Okay, it's too small. So what I have to do, you see that here, I think previously, let's change it. You can change that into your units. Okay, let's go there. See how big that is. Okay, it's right there. Now I could snap on it. You see why that's the problem within Revit, is that once the object is too small, it just will not do it. Now what I can do is that you can just say, okay, I'm gonna pick. Now it says that, okay, can't create a line. That's okay, because there's a couple of tricks you can actually do. Okay, what I typically like to do is that I just overshoot it. Okay, so you have extended. Here what I like to do is that I like to do an ellipse. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Oops. Let's see, from here to there to there. Again, I'll do the same thing for here. So you kind of get the idea. You're just basically tracing them. Sometimes what happens is that jaggedy line may not be very useful. So you may have to kind of like guesstimate where this is supposed to be. I wish in the future they would build Revit, Autodesk would build this a little bit more intuitive, because right now it's not very intuitive. So what you have to do is that you kind of have to guesstimate where things are going to be, and then you just basically have to mirror stuff. I mean, it is a pain right now. I'm feeling, you know, why a lot of this process wasn't done properly. It's because, you know, a lot of the dumb things inside Revit wasn't meant to be built, but sometimes you have to get around that problem. So here you see that right now it's too small. That's okay. We can always figure another way out. So what I like to do with this is that I like to overshoot it. You see that right now it can't do it, so I like to overshoot it. Yeah, this one can't do it, so I like to overshoot it. And then later on you're going to use void to basically cut those out. So right now I can't do it, so I have to overshoot it. Okay, let's assume that that's what you want. Okay, make sure that the edges are okay. Okay, and then next thing you're going to do is that you're going to use extrusion. Okay, and then anything that's overshoot, just create a box. Okay, and then what you're going to do with this is that you're going to choose void. Now, why do I choose to create this in solid form before I change it to void? My lesson to everybody is, if you ever work with families, is that you want to create a solid first before you do void, is to make sure that the model that you want to cut is not the model that you want. Sometimes what happens to happen is that you have very complicated model. When you create void, sometimes it cuts into the wrong item, the wrong model. So you want to make sure that you don't automatically tell Revit to cut it for you. So it's been on my practice. I just been recommending user that wants to follow this is do not oops 1/8. Do not create a void. Always create a solid first and then create a void. Now what you're gonna do is that you can basically gonna tell Revit what to cut. Okay, let's assume that's what you want. You can get rid of this and then load it in, and you notice that that's how I do it. Okay, I know it can be tedious, but if you want to get it perfectly for CNC machines or consultant that wants your model properly, it's better to kind of explode it, do it inside. You can do it inside AutoCAD as well if you wanted to do that approach. But in most cases, most people would use Revit, and they would rather do everything in Revit. So this is kind of like, you know, a tool to help you kind of create those model text, right? So make it so that it's really proper. Okay, that's the first one. The next one I'm going to talk about is how to create a simple massing within AutoCAD. Okay, so let's delete this model text. Now, whenever you create, let's say a massing, of site, let's say massing in place, what tends to happen is that you have to create, let's say, a box. Let's assume the building is 10 meters. Actually, yeah, 10 meters by, let's say, 30 meters. Now, what I can do, let's make this slightly bigger. Let's say 20 meters. Okay, let's assume that this is your building. So you have to create this, okay? Now, I could lift this up the way I want it. Now, if I wanted to chamfer this corner, you can't really do much unless you'd create this corner and do a lot of the stuff. So one of the things that users usually do is that you can go edit the profile and do your chamfer there. Let's just say this is a meter, and then a meter. Okay, finish that. Now you still have a problem because what happened is that the top part is not the same as the bottom. So you have to go dissolve again, get rid of this, and, you know, extrude it again. For a lot of users, this can be very, very tedious. Now, if you want to do a chamfer this way, it's like, yeah, good luck. So you have to kind of create different kind of item. So rather than doing that, I'm just going to show you kind of like how massing is done inside Revit, inside AutoCAD pretty easily. So here I'm just going to go in, creating like a new massing. So here I'm just going to go rectangle, 0,0. Now I'm going to make this thing, okay, I'm going to change the unit first, right? Make sure it's architectural. Okay, so here I'm just going to go 0,0, and let's assume that this is 50 feet by 100 feet. Okay, nothing so special. Now I'm going to use VP. Okay, that's the shortcut. So what this does is that it helps you orient it to various degrees. This is a pretty old command. Now, if you used to Revit, I recommend just using this. There we go. I'm an old school guy, so I'm just type everything. Now, next thing you want to do is that you want to type in EXT for extrude. Okay. Okay, that's your box. Now, if you want to add chamfer to this, okay, or fillet, first you want to use fillet. I'm going to choose my radius. Let's assume that this is 5 feet. Okay, all I have to do is just pick that edge. You notice that right now it's pretty quick. Now, if I want to fillet this down, I type in fillet again, and radius here, I'm just going to say 10 feet. So here I am just making just a simple massing, and you can just do fillet all around that. If you want to create like some sort of cutout for this, all you have to do is just create like a rectangle. Okay, I'm just going to say, okay, this is my cutout. I'm going to go extrude again. Oops, wrong side. Okay, go up this way. Now the next command I'm going to use is called a subtract, SU. Okay, next thing you want to do is that you want to select the first massing that you want to keep, and then next thing you want to do is that use this massing to just cut that out. Okay, you see how easy it is. And then now what you can do is that you can use the command chamfer. Let's say CHA. This is, again, fillet and chamfer are basically two AutoCAD command. Very simple. Like people use it to do chamfer. You can do that the same with the 3D solid. So here for the distance, I'm gonna say, okay, give me 10 feet. Okay, sure, 10 feet's good. And then what you could do is that enter. There we go. So when you go shape that in, you notice that you got a cutout there. Now, why do I use this 3D solid massing inside Revit, inside AutoCAD? Sorry, it's because some of the tools are in there. When you go to draw and modeling, okay, if you into this, you kind of have to switch your workspace to 3D mode, which is kind of unfortunate. Let's see, settings. You see that sometimes you have the basics, you have the 3D modeling. You have to switch it there. Where's my workspace? Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. The ribbon side, unfortunately, if you want a workspace, let's see, settings. My workspace is equal to 2D basic. And then it doesn't switch it, unfortunately. In the past, there is a toolbar you can actually invoke, which is workspace. You change it, this whole ribbon would change. For this one, unfortunately, I'm just going to stick with the drop down menu. Now within that model, what you have is that you have all this. Okay, this is all 3D solid. Now you notice that there's extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft. This is very similar to Revit. Okay, this is all the primitives. Oops. Now one question I always get asked is that how do you bring that menu up? So all you have to do, if you have this little button right here, you see that hide menu bar. If I hide it, that's the default. Show menu bar, it will just show that. I always turn it on because it's much easier. I'm used to the old school kind of drop down menu. There's also other meshes, right? Mesh, 3D face, and surfaces in between kind of a thing. But I usually just use the solids. Oops, draw model. It's pretty basics. Now if you want to do helix, you could do helix. One thing I like about this is that you can easily create that spiral pretty quickly. Okay, let's assume that you have you want to create like some sort of a circle. Let's say you wanted to create a Christmas tree. I'm gonna go UCS. Oops. Let's go VP first. Okay, I'm gonna create UCS. First thing I'm gonna do is that's my X axis, and then my Y axis is that I'm just gonna go at 0, 0, 10. So now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna create a circle. That's gonna be right there. Now, if I want to basically have this particular object and then use this as a profile, all I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go model, extrude. Okay, select that. Now, you're going to do is that you're going to use the path. Okay, I'm going to choose that as my path. So what you're seeing right now is that it's creating like this kind of a shape. Okay, that's a very basic kind of like 3D solid massing. So here I'm just going to go in and save as, and I'm just going to save that 3D solid mass. Say yes. Okay. Now inside Revit, I'm going to turf this out. Next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a family. I'm going to use the conceptual massing. Okay, in here what you can do is just go Import Cad and choose that 3D massing. Origin to origin is fine. Okay, now what you can do is you can go full explode. Okay, nice thing about full explode is that it actually turns this into a massing object. So here I'm just going to say form. You can put in color or textures. I'll leave it up to you how you want to do it. Once you've done that, I'm just going to load it into the project. Sure, I'm just going to place it there. Okay, now once you have this massing on, so now what you can do is that you can basically put in, I'll finish the mass. You can create a curtain style. Now here I'm just going to go duplicate and then just say fixed number. Okay, here I'm just going to choose the fixed number for both. And create this and create a system. Okay, good. Now if you want to go crazy, you can say create system. Doesn't do much, but it will follow those profile, which is kind of nice. I like that. So what you could do with this, you could say this is 64 and 64. Let's see how it does. But they're massing, right? So it's a pretty cool thing. You can do experimentation with stuff inside AutoCAD, and it will help you. Okay, I think that process is going to take a little bit longer, but those are basically the basic stuff inside inside AutoCAD. I forgot to mention there's like other couple tools you could use. Let's assume that you want to create. I'm going to go UCS back to normal. Okay, so here what you can do is that if you want to add stuff, let's assume that this is what you want to add. You can use the command called UNI, union. So what it does is that it basically merge this with that, and it will just turn that into one complete object. So when you click on this, it's one complete object. Oh yeah, there we go. That's very sexy. So you can create those bunch of snakes kind of profile. So that's it for the massing side. Just play around with it. I know that a lot of people, they're saying, you know what, I don't want to get into 3D AutoCAD, which is fine. You could still use SketchUp or Rhino. Okay, it has some tools. One thing I like about the AutoCAD side of things is that the massing is actually 3D solid if you use Extrude. So it's the same concept as using Revit. So when it translates into Revit, it's already translated as a massing. So you're not going to lose anything as you explode it. Whereas if you use SketchUp or Rhino, it may use some other stuff, which I'm not sure what how it's going to be. Okay, but I know that successfully AutoCAD to Revit will produce a much better, cleaner result for the massing. Okay, Point Manager. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys will run into this problem. I'm just going to close out of this. So let's assume that you receive a file from your consultants that looks like this. It has a lot of points. Okay, so what happened with this points is that it has some 3D elements within it. You see that there's a couple points in there. When I highlight it, there you go, there's a point, and all that point has some sort of a data position. So how do you take that data and then extract it and then put it inside Revit? There's a tool you can use. So the first thing you want to do is look for Lemak Point Manager. Okay, so what this will do is that this person, it's very awesome at the customized AutoCAD programming. You can download this. Just click on this and say save it as, and it just put it into your particular location. Inside your AutoCAD, what you're going to do is that you're going to type in app load. Okay, what this will do is that this will invoke a menu where you can load your application. AutoCAD uses a plugin called LISP routine, right? It's a very, very old kind of way to edit programming language. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the content, just go add. Now what you're going to do is that I'm going to go to this Point Manager and hit open. Okay, it will automatically add it in, but I would make sure I double click on this just to invoke it. Now sometimes it will provide you with a command like instruction how to do it. Let's say PTM is to invoke it. Now if you never see any command in it, what I would typically do is you will go into the LISP routine folder. Okay, I will right click on it and open with Notepad. So first you open up with Notepad. what you're going to do is that you're going to go find, okay, look for the C colon. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is that once you see this, this means that this is the command that it's going to first invoke. Okay, so it says PTM, it says PTM right there. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in PTM. It will bring up this dialog box. Now the first thing you want to do is that you want to select points. Okay, that's your source. Output, you want it to be a file. I'm going to browse. Okay, and I'm going to choose CSV file. Okay. Next thing I want to do is that, do you want to replace it? I'll say yes. And then, okay. Okay. So what this will do is that it will create a file with this particular kind of data. Okay. So you notice that it's all basically points. So next thing I'm going to do inside Revit, I'm going to turf this out. So I'm going to go massing, topo site. Next thing you want to do is that select insertion point. Choose this, okay, and then hit open. Now it's going to ask you what units they're supposed to be. Now you have to go back and check your units, what this unit's supposed to be. I'm going to go UN. It says that it's in inches, okay. Once you've done that, you say decimal inches, and you notice that it says, sorry, I can't do that because it fails to open file. Okay, the reason why is that I have to close out of this. Let's do it again. Import file, specific, and say pick that, and decimal inches, say okay, and there we go. Okay, you will see there's a couple of datas that you don't really need. Like for example, the bottom part, what you're going to do is that you select that, get rid of it, select the top one. It's not very useful. So it's kind of like pick and choose. Okay, what data is useful, because this data sometimes what tends to happen is that it's a pretty messy file sometimes. So sometimes it just makes no sense. What you do is just get rid of it. Now this data is actually showcasing there is a elevated train system up above. So this is why the surveyor actually tracks everything. So if you notice that there is some elevated element to it, that's what it is. Okay, so it's a pretty neat tool. So if you have like a lot of civil guys that send you files that have this data point, just tell them that, okay, send me this and then I'll do it. Now a couple things to keep in mind with the point manager. Point manager will only read decimal point. Let's say, for example, what I mean by decimal, it has to be a pure number. So let's assume that I'm going to export this out again using this. Make sure it's decimal. Let's try for the architectural and say inches. This is what I want. Now, if you use the PTM, I'm going to select. Let's assume that this is going to be 2. Okay, let's assume that this is what I want, and then it's written those files. It's going to create this file, and you notice that it's going to have that inches. Revit will not read those. I'm just going to demonstrate what I mean. Okay, specify point, hit open, and say this is decimal inches. It says that failed to open file. Actually, I should close out of that. Create import files. Let's try it again. You see no point was found in the file. So it would give you that error warning. So to combat that, I tell the user, if you want to change that, let's say this is inches, make sure they're always set to decimal. So when that point manager export those data, it's going to be just the raw out data. So it's going to be just a pure number and without anything else. Okay, so those are pretty useful tools. I'm gonna basically at the end of this session, down the comments below, I'm just gonna tell you where to load so that you can just go into those website and just download this add-on. Okay, next one I'm going to talk about is 3D face slice and merge. Now, this one is a pretty useful tool, especially if you are using a lot of the other software. Let's say, assuming that you are doing 3D Rhino or let's say SketchUp files, you want to create some sort of like profiling inside Revit. It's going to be pretty difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys this next tool. It's called the point. It's not a point. It's the Taylor. It's not Taylor Swift. Sorry. Let's see. Mesh. AutoCAD. Tailoring. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the one I want. I should check out my history, what I look for. In any case, so it's a polyface Taylor. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, so what it has is that it has this polyface.de, which is a German guy who did this wonderful apps. This was used for AutoCAD 2000. I mean, it used for R14 as well. So this is a pretty old program. It's over almost 18 years. So if you think about this, yes, it's a pretty old software. So what this does is that you can go in there and download those. Where do you go download? Installation. There we go. So you go to www.polyface.de. It allows you to basically download this. This is the one that you want, Taylor Zip. Okay. If you want to try the other stuff, go ahead. I haven't tried those. The only thing I tried is the Zip Taylor. And what you're gonna do is that once you unzip it, okay, it's gonna be here. So it's gonna have this. I took a look at the LISP routine and then a VLX. VLX is fast load, auto LISP. So I'm just gonna use both of them. Okay, so here I'm just gonna go AP, go to content, go to add, Zip Taylor, and I'm just gonna load those. And then I'm just gonna open up one of my file. Now, why would I use this file? Now, imagine you're in a scenario. I'm just gonna open up actually, let's go into the Coupe Deluxe DWG. Okay, let's assume you want to do like a profile of a very complicated geometry that you're using. In the past, what tends to happen is that if you want to do this really complicated, I'll show you what this is supposed to be. Okay, it's basically like this, like very complicated shape. So what tends to happen is that when you start modeling this stuff inside, let's say Rhino, AutoCAD, or any other software, what tends to happen is that they don't have a good tools to basically cut where you want it to be. So what this does in AutoCAD is that it gives you the ability to do cutting. So let's assume that I'm gonna just load those two, and within that polyface, it gives you the two commands that I'm gonna use. One is called the sew, and the other one is xSlice. Okay, what sew does is that, let's assume that you have this thing break apart into pieces and you want to merge it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those and I'm going to type in SEW, and then what happened is that right now it's one piece. Next, if you want to slice them in part, let's assume that this is the grid system. Let's say this is my grid system. I want to slice through this. I'm going to use the command xSlice. Okay. And then I'm going to pick that as my x and then x 0, 0, 1. Ask you if you want to keep both sides. Yes. And then what it does is that it cuts that into the profile. So in the past, AutoCAD doesn't have a good way of cutting your meshes. This is all pure mesh. So Revit doesn't have this kind of ability, unfortunately. You cannot cut anything and then create a profile. So what this program will do is, assuming that you have a mesh program, all your model is mesh. So this will basically, what it does is that it slices and dices. And then what I did is that with this particular model is that I'm able to create a profile, and then I'm able to create this model right here using those profile. So let's open this up. So what you're seeing previously in that particular object, it's gonna go consistent color, is this guy right here. So if I never did the slicing one, it's gonna take me forever to kind of figure out how to do that. So in that particular case, I'm able to create profile based on that, and thanks to that, I'm able to create this kind of a car. So if you think about how the meshing works, and if you want to kind of split those geometry into pieces, this is a good way to do it. All right, finally, let's talk about Hatchmaker. Okay, so you can go to Google. Okay, this is a pretty old trick as well. So it's called Hatchmaker. So it's part of the Catalyst tips. So you can say download the tip. Okay, it still works. Okay, thank goodness. What this does is that it basically creates a hatch inside AutoCAD, and then you can actually use it for your Revit and whatever software you want to use it. Now, one of the benefits of this is that you can create any hatches you want and then just use it for Revit. Now, the unfortunate thing about Revit side is that, yes, there is a plugin for Revit. The unfortunate part about it is that one of the freebie program, Create Hatches, right now requires you to pay them. So when you think about that long-term strategy, requires you to pay it, it just defeats the whole purpose. Excuse me. In the past, that hatch creation inside Revit was free, and then the recent version, they just force you to pay for it. So it's kind of not working in your favor. So if you want to minimize the cost, this is how I would create my hatches. So inside your AutoCAD, I'm just gonna close out of this. I'm just going to use the AutoCAD acad.dwt. The next thing you want to do is that once you load that in, go app load again. Okay, go to content. I'm going to add. Here, I'm just going to go into this zip files that I unpacked, and then it's called Hatchmaker. Double click on that, and then double click, and then it will invoke this command, draw hatch, save hatch. Okay, so those are the two commands that you want to know. So I'm going to say draw hatch. So what it's telling you is that draw pattern within one box. So this is the box that you want to use, points and line only. Okay, so let's assume that you want to create a hatch pattern like a checkerboard pattern. So how do you do that? So here I'm just going to use line. Okay, I'm just going to go midpoint to midpoint, and then this one I'll do the same thing. I'll go midpoint to midpoint. So the next thing you want to do is that you want to turn on the grid. Now for a grid, I want to set my aspect to 0.1. Snap is the same thing, 0.1. Good. Now what you're going to do in here is that just draw a bunch of line and make sure that your ortho is off. Yeah. Function F3. Just turn it off. Okay. So you're going to do that. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to go array. I'm just gonna go rectangle. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is column spacing, just make it 1, and then 0.1, and then roll, let's assume that it's going to be 12, and then it's going to be 0.1. Oh, actually it's going to be less than that. Increment 0.01. Spacing. Okay, once you have it in there, again, I could go in here and say this is going to be 0.01. Oops, 0.01. Okay, good. So you wanna make it as very small as possible. And here, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy this. Oops, copy this. Copy. Copy from there and then put it there. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to explode this so that you have lines, okay? And some of them are just a repetition, okay? So now what you have is that you have this sort of a checker pattern kind of a look. All right, the next thing you want to do is that you want to go save hatch. Okay, enter to continue. I'm going to save this. Scrap this, checker. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in here, go to my content, here I already create checker. I'm just going to call this checker 2 just to save. Okay, it's going to say okay, checker 2, it's done. Now the next thing you want to do inside your checker, you want to create a line, okay? So what you're going to do is that you're going to add a line here, okay? If it's a model, there we go. This is what I want. I'm just going to copy this. This is the line that you have to put it in, okay? Because if you don't do this, Revit will not recognize the pattern. If you're on drafting, make sure is you type in drafting. It has to be cap, okay? So if you're doing a small letters and anything, it just will not work. So here, I'm just going to go in here and just put drafting, draft, save it. And then right now, what you can do is that your hatch pattern can be used. So next, I'm going to go into my project. Okay, I'm going to go to level 1. Quit this, and then now I'm going to do is that I'm going to go create region, okay, and then here I'm just going to go checker. In here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep it drafting, go new, just going to go checker. Click on custom, go import, and what you're going to do is I'm going to go content, going to go list routine, and in here you have the checker 2. All right, how I would do it is that if you want to make this thing 0.5, I would type in 0.5. Now this applies for older version. Let's say if you're using 2018 or older, you have to do this because when I set that OK and OK and OK, and there we go, you have checker. So what happened is that if I don't set that up, and if I go edit, you see that it's going to go back to 1. So I like to do that, put in 0.5. In 2019, you don't have to do that anymore because this import scale, you can go in there and physically edit those. Okay, you don't have to constantly import them in. It kind of sucks. You have to do this for every single time. If let's say you want to change scale, Click OK. And now I want to set to 1 and say OK, OK, and then OK. Here I'm just going to go to 1 to 25. Oh, look at that. 1 to 10. Yeah, it's going to get too small. So 1 to 5, it's going to get way too small. So pick and choose. Okay, 1 to 20 looks fine, but once you zoom out, it looks terrible. So this is how I do checker patterns, hatches. So if you find that very interesting, yeah, just test it out. I'm just going to upload those texture, those hatch pattern, so that you guys can just try it out and just build your own. So guys, this concludes today's topic. If you have any questions, just feel free to comment down below. And looking forward to the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.